Oh, hello there. Yes, well, good grief. Decidedly midweekish, isn't it? Yes, we're all just waiting for something else to happen, aren't we? I mean, loads of things are happening, but we're just waiting for other things to make themselves clearer as to exactly how much we are definitely going to bomb people because, well, that's British foreign policy and it's certainly American foreign policy, and, well, it's undoubtedly the entire modus operandi of the Israeli state. But yeah, it gives the papers a chance to sabre rattle and draw great diagrams of big bombs and planes and things, which they just love to do. Meanwhile, in the real world, of course, actual public opinion is a lot more muted on this because we have been here before, have been bitten several times about this, but still, if you can fool people all of the time, then you're going to carry on doing it, I suppose. Yeah, that's the British media for you. And even when you're not buying it, you're a traitor. Yes. Anyway, it got me thinking about sort of, past. Currently I'm reading that nice Mr. Holland's, friend of Al Murray. Oh yeah, pub landlord, tigers, Nazis, Germans, all that stuff. Yeah, his book on Casino, which is, for those of us of a military bent, if you like, it's a damn fine read. Definitely very, very well researched, which meant that this caught my eye by Simon Heffer, the 20 history books everyone should read. Yeah, that includes you. Our expert historian and columnist surveys the historical field and picks a shelf's work of books. It's a pretty small shelf, I must admit, that every intelligent reader should own, yes. And you can instantly, by the sort of byline there, see the direction of travel because it's about what you should read, not necessarily that you might want to read. And it's full of canon, basically. I don't know. I read Decline and Fall. Gibbons' Decline and Fall as a child, and I never want to read it again. Like most things on the list, there is one thing on the list that I would read again, having read it, but most of the others aren't. I think if you're going to read historical stuff, I think it's worthwhile reading more modern stuff, as in stuff that's been written about the last 30 or 40 years, because it tends to have a much better viewpoint on things. Woke is that? Yes, maybe if you want. But anyway, I thought, well, as Simon has, foisted his evil opinions upon you, I'd do exactly the same thing and just give you some books that have caught my eye. Some of them I've mentioned before, but I just thought in no particular order about anything, but historical, if nothing else. I can hardly recommend John Savage's England Dreaming. Pretty much anything that John Savage writes is very, very good in terms of what you might think of as sociology. It's social history. If you'd watched Pistol, the sort of Sex Pistols biography on Apple, yes, which neatly, I think, captured the mood. Yes, I know it was the 70s wasn't exactly that, it's not exactly that, it's not what happened, all that stuff, right, whatever. But it captures the mood of the period. And England's Dreaming, for those of us who were teenagers at the time, is a wonderfully evocative book. It really does summon up Britain in the late 1970s, hence the history thing. If you're interested in more generic sociology, it's still history basically, can heartily recommend Wolfgang Streck's How Will Capitalism End? It's knocking on now, it's over 10 years old. But it does give you a very, very, very good overview of where our economics is likely to end up. Most of the things here aren't particularly edifying if you fancy a good sleep at night. Yes, Four Futures by Peter Fraze is a very, very thought-provoking small book. If you've got just a short amount of time to read something. We are faced with four different potential futures. There is, as according to the book, there's rentism, which we kind of live in at the moment, whereby wealth is simply being extracted from us. There's socialism, living in a land of scarcity. There's communism, living in a land of poverty. Or there's a kind of genocidal fascism, which we do seem to be heading towards. But it's very, very thought thought-provoking book. It's again on that sort of history, but at the same time sociology sort of cusp, I would argue. For a view of how exactly we got here, I heartily recommend, as I have done many times before, Nancy MacLean's Democracy in Chains, which is about, well, basically about the Koch brothers, as they were then, Koch brothers singular now, and their very long march through the institutions, which no one's allowed to talk about because it's only the lefties that have big plans that span decades to, well, get someone like Donald Trump into the White House. Still very, very relevant today, even though it's receding somewhat. I can't recommend enough to you anything pretty much by Peter Leinberg. Very often stated those things here. The Many-Headed Hydra is a really good way into his stuff, and an absolutely astonishing read in terms of the history of a completely different view of the history of the transatlantic trade in terms of the people and the revolutionary thought that a lot of them had. Really, really damn fine read. Speaking of which, David Graeber's The Dawn of Everything, which got rave reviews when it came out. Sad loss, I think, in terms of academic research. If you're very interested in prehistory, it's a really good way in. Our notions about prehistory have been shaken a lot in about the last 5 to 10 years. There's a lot of very, very good stuff that's updated on a very regular basis on YouTube. You can find this stuff out for yourself, or if you're particularly interested, I can point you to a couple. But we are getting to understand that our ancestors, like let's say 10 to 30 odd thousand years ago, were an awful lot more sophisticated than we previously thought. This is where we sort of come apart from the canon of work that Heffer might say, because a lot of people have this kind of very stereotypical view of our ancestors that suddenly, about 5 to 10,000 years ago, they all got the same idea at the same time and jumped up and down and basically became domesticated and started reading things. The world is a lot more odd than that. You know, you can just think about small things like the tin trade out of Cornwall, which was the foundation for the entire Bronze Age in Europe a very long time ago. And we've had cities and settled civilizations for a lot longer than, let's say, 20 years ago people would have thought. Even just stuff about Stonehenge that we're finding out makes it a lot more remarkable. The reason why we don't understand more is because these people primarily worked with wood, and wood don't survive so well. Yeah, it's a good place to start though, an anarchist's view of anthropology. On a more biological bent, from a couple of years ago now, Kat Bohannon's Eve, and about the female body, which got various turfs jumping up and down because it was quite sympathetic to ideas about trans. But it's a really, really interesting way of thinking about human evolution and the span of human history, but from a very, very much from a female perspective. Yes, not something you're going to get out of Simon Heffer's list. Anyway, for a superb overarching view of the impact of capitalism upon the world, in particular Empire of Cotton by Sven Beckert is astounding. I can't recommend this book highly enough. It has absolutely everything. It will leave you just staring into the distance, thinking about the world, because we forget so much about those dominant industries that they were, even say 125 years ago, and about the importance of those foundations to our modern world. If you want to read something slightly more up to date, I can heartily recommend Keith Lowe's Savage Continent, which is about the kind of end of the Second World War. There are loads of books about the end of the Second World War, and they can tend to dribble off after about 1946, but Keith Lowe puts all of this stuff into context. In particular, you can read more about the resistance movements to the Soviet Union in Ukraine, which in many ways leads us to where we are today. Again, it's not necessarily orthodox or canon history, but by God, it's well researched. For a lighter touch, and no, I'm not being that ironic about anything, Catherine Arnold's Necropolis is a stunning, again, sociological work about the history of Victorian London and its attitude to death. Absolutely jaw-dropping stuff about the reason why, for example, the majority of people in this country are cremated. Yes, because she didn't want to end up in a sludgy pit with hundreds of other bodies. Yeah, just absolutely superb book. Anyway, just those, I thought. Not going to give links to you, to hell with it. You can write them down and look them up yourself. Any of those are an astoundingly good read, but they aren't orthodox canon, as I say. I like to read things probably to a certain extent I might agree with, but a lot of these books I picked up just because they looked interesting, and it's wonderful when books take you into a completely different space. I happened to read somebody, it might have been Akira actually, who was talking about Peter Lindbergh's The Many-Headed Hydra, and I just bought it on spec. And since then I've bought everything else that he's written, because my understanding now of the 17th and 18th century in terms of Britain and its empire has been enormously expanded by that. Anyway, do have a glorious rest of the day. Yeah, it's going to be stinking hot at the weekend, so I don't know. I'm probably going to do what the cat's done, which is just mope around and go to sleep and just eat some nice things and probably demand cuddles. Yes, not necessarily in that order. Do have a good one.